The great question. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you've spent your life trying to avoid, the shame, the rage, the jealousy, the impulses you dare not name, is not your enemy, but your essence. The very things you have buried so deep inside, locked away in the darkness of your mind, are not intruders. They are you. And here is the paradox that shakes the foundation of your existence. The parts of yourself you fear the most may be the very source of your strength. We are taught from childhood to be good, to be kind, to be civilized. We are told to hide our anger, to suppress our desires, to turn the other cheek and swallow the darkness. But what if all this time your quest to be good has made you weak? What if your denial of the shadow, the dark double that walks behind you, has left you hollow, fragile, easy to break? Carl Jung believed this was the greatest tragedy of the modern soul. Not that we sin, but that we pretend to be saints. Not that we have darkness, but that we refuse to face it. Look around. The world rewards politeness, obedience, conformity. And yet beneath the smiling masks, people simmer with unspoken fury, envy, lust, greed. We see it in scandals, in sudden explosions of violence, in the quiet despair of lives lived in suffocating decency. Why does this happen? Because what we repress does not disappear. It waits. It grows teeth in the dark. And when it breaks free, it devours us. Jung called this hidden force the shadow, the collection of all the qualities we reject in ourselves. You think you have buried your monster? No. You have only chained it, and every day the chain rusts a little more. Ask yourself, why do you fear your own darkness? Why do you call your aggression evil while applauding it in heroes on the screen? Why do you deny your hunger for power, your longing for chaos, your capacity for cruelty, when these things are carved into your very being? Jung's answer was brutal in its simplicity, because society taught you to fear your wholeness. It told you to amputate half your soul and call the mutilation virtue. It told you to live as half a human and name it morality. But you feel the cost of this mutilation, don't you? You feel it in the quiet moments, in the dreams that make you sweat, in the impulses you cannot confess even to yourself. Here is the truth you were never meant to hear. The monster within you is not evil. It is raw energy, pure potential, power that can destroy you or transform you, depending on whether you embrace it or deny it. The shadow is not your prison. It is your forge. And yet, most people will spend their lives running from it, terrified of what they might find if they turn inward. They will project it onto others, blaming the world for the darkness they refuse to face. They will call others corrupt, violent, immoral, never realizing that what they hate most in others is the reflection of what they buried in themselves. But what if you stopped running? What if you turned around and looked your monster in the eye? What if you said, "I see you. You are mine"? What would happen then? Jung believed this was the only path to true strength. Integration, not suppression. To deny the shadow is to live as a ghost of yourself. To embrace it is to become whole. Dangerous, yes, but fully alive. Because here is the paradox. Only when you accept your capacity for evil can you truly choose good. Only when you confront your own potential for destruction can you wield power without being consumed by it. So I ask you, who are you really? The polite mask you show the world, or the seething, untamed force you have spent years trying to silence? What would your life look like if you stopped hiding and started harnessing? And what price have you paid for the denial? This self-imposed exile from your own depths. These questions are not comfortable. They are not meant to be. They are meant to pull you into the abyss you've avoided, because only in that abyss will you find the truth. And the truth is this: you cannot kill the monster. You can only embrace it. The choice is yours. Integration or disintegration, wholeness or hypocrisy, power or paralysis. And that is where we begin. The roots of this darkness, why it exists, and why you have been taught to fear it. The hidden problem, its psychological, philosophical roots. To understand why you fear your own darkness, you must travel back, not just to your childhood, but to the architecture of the human psyche and the machinery of society. The fear of the shadow is not an accident. It is designed, cultivated, and reinforced by everything around you: your parents, your teachers, your culture, even your language. From the moment you could walk, you were taught to divide yourself into two halves: the acceptable self and the forbidden self. The acceptable self smiles, obeys, says please and thank you. The forbidden self rages, lusts, desires, defies. One half gets rewarded with love and praise. The other gets punished, shamed, exiled. So you learn quickly: love is conditional, safety requires performance, and to survive, you amputate. You cut off the wild parts of yourself and bury them deep, convincing yourself they no longer exist. But Jung warns us, the shadow does not die, it festers, and the more you deny it, the more it rules your life from the dark. Why is this? Because repression is a lie your psyche cannot sustain forever. Every unacknowledged desire becomes a distortion. Every exiled impulse seeks expression, not through your conscious will, but through sabotage. This is why you explode in anger over trivial things, why you dream of acts you would never admit, why you find yourself drawn to people and situations that mirror the very qualities you despise. These are the fingerprints of the shadow, marking every corner of your life. Why? You think you control it, but it controls you. Carl Jung believed this split, this violent separation between light and dark, is the root of neurosis in modern humanity. We are not sick because we have darkness. We are sick because we refuse to integrate it. He wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." But how many of us dare to make the darkness conscious? We would rather live in the shallow glow of virtue signaling, moral platitudes, and curated identities than face the raw truth of what we are. And why wouldn't we? Society punishes authenticity when that authenticity is inconvenient. A child who screams in rage is scolded. A teenager who defies authority is labeled rebellious. An adult who questions the script of polite living is shamed, ostracized, silenced. Culture demands masks because masks are manageable. Masks obey. Masks do not threaten the fragile order of things. This is why religions, governments, and even families conspire, often unconsciously, to keep you fragmented. A whole human being, one who has embraced both light and darkness, is unpredictable, untamable, powerful. And power is dangerous in the wrong hands, especially to those who rule by fear. So they tame you early. They teach you to fear your instincts, to distrust your aggression, to see ambition as greed, sexuality as sin, rage as evil. They hand you a moral code carved from fear and call it virtue. And you obey, not because it makes sense, but because the price of rebellion is exile. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He railed against what he called the slave morality, a morality that glorifies meekness, humility, and submission because it keeps the herd docile. He warned that beneath the hymns of virtue often lurks resentment, the hatred of strength disguised as love of goodness. And yet, here you are, centuries later, still shackled by the same chains. You call your weakness kindness, your conformity morality, your fear humility. But deep down, you feel it, the quiet rage of a lion forced to live as a lamb. Here is the brutal irony. The more you try to be good, the more dangerous you become. Not consciously, but unconsciously. Because what you refuse to face in yourself will find another way out. It will leak into your relationships, poisoning them with passive aggression. It will infect your ambitions, twisting them into ruthless power grabs disguised as noble causes. It will erupt in violence, addiction, self-destruction. Every scandal you read about, the righteous preacher caught in vice, the virtuous politician drowning in corruption, is the shadow breaking loose after years of denial. And yet, instead of learning the lesson, we double down. We call for more virtue, more morality, more laws to keep the darkness at bay. But darkness does not vanish by decree. It waits. It whispers. It grows stronger in silence. And the harder you fight it, the deeper its roots sink into your soul. So here is the question that should haunt you. What happens when an entire civilization lives in denial of its own shadow? What happens when nations project their evil onto enemies, when communities scapegoat outsiders, when individuals condemn in others what they cannot face in themselves. History answers in blood. Wars, genocides, witch hunts, ideological purges, all born from the refusal to own our darkness. And yet, within this grim reality lies a paradoxical hope. Because if the shadow holds the seeds of destruction, it also holds the seeds of greatness. Your aggression can become courage. Your lust can become vitality. Your hunger for power can become leadership. But only if you stop pretending to be pure. Only if you take the terrifying step of saying, "Yes, this darkness is mine, and I will not let it rule me from the shadows." This is the heart of Jung's message. You cannot amputate your way to wholeness. You cannot kill the monster. You can and only embrace it. Not to unleash it blindly, but to integrate it wisely. Because until you do, you will remain its puppet, dancing to strings you cannot see. And now we must confront the next question. What is the cost of refusing this integration? What price do we pay, as individuals and as a culture, for living as half-humans? The consequences are not just personal, they are catastrophic, and you are living them right now. The unseen consequences. What happens when a person, or an entire civilization, chooses to live in denial of the shadow? The answer is not silence or peace. The answer is chaos disguised as order, violence disguised as virtue, destruction disguised as righteousness. Because what you refuse to face in yourself will return, not as a whisper, but as a scream, and the scream will echo through every part of your life. Look at yourself first. How many of your good actions are truly good, and how many are masks for something darker? You donate to charity, but is it pure compassion or the hunger for recognition? You act humble, but is it humility or fear of standing out? You avoid confrontation and call it kindness, but deep down, is it weakness, or worse, cowardice? These are not accusations. They are invitations to honesty, because until you admit these truths, you will live in a perpetual war with yourself, a war you cannot win. This war manifests as anxiety, depression, compulsions, addictions. Jung observed that neurosis often begins as a moral problem, the clash between what you want and what you believe you should want. When you exile your desires, they return as symptoms. You binge on food, sex, alcohol, because these are the few places your shadow can breathe. You lash out at loved ones because they trigger the qualities you have buried in yourself. You feel inexplicably empty because half of you is locked in a cage, and the more you chase happiness through surface solutions, therapy without depth, spirituality without shadow work, self-help without self-confrontation, the more that emptiness grows. But the consequences do not stop with you. They spread like cracks in glass, radiating through families, communities, nations. Because a society is nothing more than a collection of individuals, and when individuals live in denial, the collective becomes a theater of projections. We see this every day. The person who cannot face their own aggression crusades against violent culture. The one who represses desire becomes a moral policeman, hunting sin in others. Entire nations demonize enemies as evil, conveniently forgetting the same impulses thrive within their own borders. This is why history repeats its atrocities. Every witch hunt, every genocide, every ideological purge begins with the same lie. The darkness is out there, not in here. Do you see the cost? A world where people live in masks becomes a world addicted to scapegoats. Because the more unbearable your own darkness becomes, the more desperately you must find it in others. And so we build systems of blame. We weaponize morality. We punish shadows that look like ours because it's easier to kill an enemy than to confront a mirror. This is why politics has become a blood sport, why cancel culture thrives, why every tribe insists on its own innocence while damning the other side to hell. We are not fighting evil, we are fighting our reflections, and yet we call this progress. We congratulate ourselves on being enlightened, civilized, evolved. But peel back the mask, and what do you see? The same primal impulses, now dressed in moral language. Power struggles disguised as justice, revenge disguised as activism, tribal hatred disguised as patriotism. We tell ourselves we are better than our ancestors, but the shadow laughs, because technology may change, but psychology does not. The darkness we buried centuries ago still rules us, only now it wears two. He clothes of virtue. But perhaps the most chilling consequence is personal. You lose your soul without even realizing it. When you amputate your darkness, you amputate your vitality. You become a hollow vessel, easy to control, desperate for meaning, addicted to distractions. This is why modern life feels so empty, why millions drown in entertainment, consumerism, and endless noise. We have silenced the monster, and in doing so, we have silenced the music. Because the same force that gives birth to cruelty also gives birth to creativity. The same instinct that can destroy also builds cathedrals, writes symphonies, leads revolutions. Kill the shadow, and you kill your fire. And here lies the great tragedy. The qualities that terrify you are often the source of your genius. Your rage can become courage. Your lust can become art. Your hunger for power can become leadership, but only if you dare to own them. Otherwise, they rot in the dark, turning sour, poisoning your life from within. And this poison does not just destroy you. It seeps into your children, your relationships, your society. Weakness breeds dependence. Denial breeds destruction. And all of it begins with the refusal to face the monster in the mirror. So now you must ask yourself, what price are you paying for your denial? How many of your failures, fears, and frustrations trace back to this one act of self-betrayal, the act of pretending to be pure? The answer will shake you, because it is not small. It is everything. Everything you hate about your life, everything that feels hollow or stagnant or broken, is the echo of the shadow you refuse to meet. And yet, this is not the end of the story, because if denial destroys, then confrontation redeems. If the shadow has the power to enslave you, it also has the power to set you free. But only if you are willing to commit the ultimate heresy in a world that worships masks, to embrace the monster. How? That is the rebellion. And it begins now. The rebellion. How to break free. Rebellion, in this context, is not the sedition. Rebellion you've been taught to imagine. Not riots in the streets, not grand acts of defiance. It is far more dangerous than that, because it begins where no one can see, in the hidden corridors of your own mind. To embrace your shadow is the most radical act of freedom, because a person who has befriended their darkness cannot be controlled. They cannot be manipulated by fear, shamed into submission, or bribed with comfort. They have already walked through the fire of their own soul and emerged whole, and wholeness is terrifying to a world built on fragmentation. But how do you begin? How do you rebel against a lifetime of conditioning, a culture that rewards masks and punishes authenticity? The first step is brutally simple yet excruciating. You must stop lying to yourself. Stop pretending to be pure, to be harmless, to be only good. You are not. No one is. Inside you lives the capacity for cruelty, lust, greed, violence, and that is not a flaw. It is nature. It is truth. The real sin is not having darkness. It is pretending you don't. So start by telling the truth, at least to yourself. Write down the impulses you've hidden, the fantasies you've denied, the grudges you nurse in secret. Do not censor. Do not moralize. This is not confession. This is reclamation. Next, you must resist the temptation to unleash the shadow blindly. Integration is not indulgence. Embracing the monster does not mean letting it ravage the world. That is chaos, not wholeness. Jung warned that the goal is not to become your shadow, but to own it consciously, to harness its energy without being consumed. How? By recognizing its voice when it speaks. When rage floods your veins, do not act without thought. Sit with it. Ask it what it wants, what wound it is protecting, what power it offers. When envy burns, do not shame it away. Envy reveals desire. It tells you what you secretly long for. Or if you listen, your vices become teachers, your darkness a map. This is where strength is born, in the tension of opposites. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong work of uniting light and dark into a self that is not split but whole. It is not easy. It demands courage most people will never muster, because integration means dismantling every illusion about who you think you are. It means admitting you are capable of everything you condemn. It means walking into the abyss without a guarantee that you will return. And yet, on the other side of that abyss lies the only freedom worth having, the freedom to live without fear of yourself. But the rebellion is not just inward, it ripples outward. The moment you own your shadow, the world loses its power over you. Why? Because control thrives on projection. Systems manipulate you by weaponizing your guilt, your fear of being exposed. When you accept your darkness, what can they shame you with? What can they threaten? A whole person cannot be blackmailed by their own nature. They are untouchable, and that terrifies the machine. Consider this. Every tyrant, every manipulator, every algorithm that exploits your weakness does so because you refuse to face yourself. Your denial is their leverage. Take that away, and the game collapses. This is why embracing the shadow is the most revolutionary act of all, not because it topples governments, but because it topples the inner dictatorship that made you easy to rule. And there is another gift, one society desperately needs: compassion. True compassion is impossible as long as you live in denial. Because when you disown your darkness, you will hate it in others. You will judge, condemn, scapegoat. But when you see the monster in yourself and make peace with it, you stop waging holy wars against the world. You see through the illusions. You recognize that the cruel eye in your enemy is a possibility in you. And from that recognition blooms a fierce, honest empathy. Not the shallow tolerance of slogans, but a deep knowing. I am capable of what you are, and therefore I will not hate you. So how do you live this rebellion daily? Start small. Speak one uncomfortable truth. Admit one forbidden thought. Choose one act that aligns with your authentic self, even if it terrifies you. Every time you do this, you chip away at the cage. And as the cage falls, something extraordinary happens. The monster you feared begins to change. It becomes a source of power, creativity, vitality. You write with fire, you love with ferocity, you lead with courage. Because now you are not half a person, you are whole. But do not mistake wholeness for peace. Integration is not the end of struggle, it is the beginning of a higher struggle. The struggle to live consciously in the presence of immense power. Because once you embrace the shadow, you hold dynamite in your hands. Will you use it to build or to destroy? That is the question that separates the tyrant from the creator, the murderer from the visionary. And that question brings us to the final, most dangerous truth. The truth that will change everything you think you know about morality, freedom, and the purpose of your life. The ultimate truth, the final, most powerful realization. And now, we arrive at the truth you have been circling all along. The truth that will unsettle everything you thought you knew about good and evil, about freedom, about yourself. You were taught that goodness is the absence of evil, that purity is the highest virtue, that morality means erasing every dark impulse from your being. But what if all of that was a lie? What if true strength does not come from purity, but from power restrained by choice? Jung believed something radical, something most people will never accept. To be truly good, you must first embrace your capacity for evil, not indulge it blindly, not unleash it in chaos, but acknowledge it, own it, integrate it. Because until you know the monster within you, your goodness is an illusion, a fragile mask, a brittle shield that shatters the moment life tests you. Look at history. The kindest men become killers in war. The righteous crusaders become tyrants when handed power. Why? Because they never confronted the darkness inside themselves. They thought they were pure, and that delusion made them dangerous. Goodness without power is weakness. It is obedience, not virtue. It costs nothing to be gentle when you have no claws. But imagine the man who has claws and chooses not to strike. Imagine the woman who has fire in her veins and chooses to create rather than destroy. That is goodness. That is strength. And that is impossible without the shadow. So here is the ultimate paradox. The very thing you fear most, your rage, your lust, your hunger for power, is not your enemy. It is the raw material of your greatness. Every saint carries the same instincts as the sinner. The difference is integration. The saint does not deny the darkness. He holds it in his hands and says, "You are mine. You will serve me, not rule me." This is why Jung said, "The person who cannot imagine evil becomes its victim." Because what you refuse to imagine in yourself, you will project onto the world. And then you will fight it with blind violence, never realizing you are fighting your own reflection. Now ask yourself, why does this truth terrify you? Because it destroys the comforting fantasy that you are a good person. It forces you to see that goodness is not a default setting. It is a choice, and a costly one. It demands responsibility. It demands strength. It demands that you stand at the edge of your own abyss and stare into it without flinching. And most people will never do this. They will cling to their masks, their moral slogans, their hollow identities, because it is easier to pretend to confront. But if you are still here, reading these words, then you are not most people. You are ready. So what does this mean for your life? It means stop running from your darkness. Stop killing parts of yourself to please a world that profits from your weakness. Stop praying for light while burying the source of your fire. Instead, turn inward. Walk into the cave where your monsters live. Sit with them. Learn their names. Ask them what they want. You will discover that they are not demons sent to damn you. They are exiled kings, banished warriors, wild gods, waiting for you to bring them home. And when you do, when you unite the broken pieces of your soul, you will become something rare and dangerous, a whole human being. And do not be fooled. Wholeness is not serenity. It is storm and stillness together. It is the lion lying down with the lamb inside you. It is strength so immense that it frightens you, because you realize you are capable of anything. And that realization is the birth of real morality, because only when you know your capacity for destruction can you truly choose creation. Only when you feel the weight of your power can you bow before life with humility, not as a slave, but as a sovereign. This is the ultimate truth. You are both light and darkness, saint and beast, creator and destroyer. And your destiny is not to kill one and worship the other, but to bring them into union, to forge a self so integrated, so alive, that the world cannot comprehend you. That is individuation. That is freedom. And it begins the moment you whisper the words no one ever taught you to say, "I am whole." So now, you stand before the final question, the question that will decide the shape of your soul. Will you keep living as half a human, shackled by fear and illusion? Or will you step into the terrifying, exhilarating truth of your own totality? The monster is waiting, not to devour you, but to become you. And once you embrace it, nothing will ever own you again. The choice is yours. Make it